Welcome to the Ljubljana podcast, the place to come for travel and food tips, cultural highlights, insider stories, and chats with locals. It's everything you need to know about Slovenia's beloved capital city. I'm your host, Slovenia's Ambassador of Tourism, Noah Charney. Let's fire it up. For our first episode, we thought we'd bring you a one-stop overview of some of my favorite things in Ljubljana. It's based on an article I wrote for the Guardian newspaper, part of their local guides series. So this is an expat's guide to Ljubljana. Now, of course, it's just scratching the surface, but it's a good place to start. How many times can a city be called a hidden gem and still remain hidden? Well, this is the question for Ljubljana, and the country of which it's the capital, Slovenia. It feels as though it is constantly being discovered by the more worldly and knowledgeable tourists like you, even when its praises have been sung in just about every magazine and broadsheet with a travel section. And yet this city of some 300,000 people, a quarter of which are students, still feels like a delight that is beyond the standard tourist route, perhaps because it surprises with its charms, its worldliness, accessibility, its idyllic, well, just about everything. Ljubljana means beloved, and there's a reason why. Though it sounds like hyperbole, I've yet to meet a tourist who did not love Ljubljana. I was one of them once. While still a student, I undertook a Eurailing trip, as American college students often do, and I stopped in Ljubljana for an overnight. Of all the stops from London to Budapest, this was the city that felt most immediately livable. And it was the biggest surprise because I arrived with no expectations. It felt more like Switzerland than its former Yugoslavian neighbors, and Ljubljana has always been the most economic and culturally advanced of ex-Yugoslavia, drawing influence more from nearby Venice and Vienna than from elsewhere in the Balkans. It is also both one of the greenest cities in the world and one of the safest. English is spoken everywhere at a very high level. Its welcome feel, its accessibility, its reasonable prices, but affluent vibe all make it an ideal weekend getaway. Or, like me, you might just end up and move here. I've become Slovenia's most vocal cheerleader in the Anglophone media, including past articles in The Guardian, and I even wrote a book called Slovenology, Living and Traveling in the World's Best Country, which again sounds like hyperbole, but my argument that Slovenia and its capital have the highest quality of life for the most reasonable cost of living is a researched hypothesis. Many a foreigner writes to me with a request for recommendations, and so I'm always delighted to help others discover the facets of this hidden gem. I do it in books, I do it in articles, and now I'm doing it for you in a podcast form. I'm often asked where I recommend staying in Ljubljana. My answer is easy: Hotel Mrak. Hotel Mrak is my home away from home in Slovenia's capital. It's a family-run, elegant boutique hotel with a perfect location, right in the pedestrian-friendly heart of the city. You can easily walk anywhere from Hotel Mrak. Like me, it's got an artsy vibe, and it also has an epically good breakfast that is worth a journey. Take a look for yourself at hotelmrak.si. That's hotelmrak.si. So let's look at some of the highlights of Ljubljana in a very brief overview. Let's begin with Yugo-Nostalgia. Maybe the best way to begin is with what first fascinates foreigners, the aspects of Ljubljana that recall its Yugoslav heritage. These days, such locations are considered retro and are hipster hangouts, but they feel most exotic to guests. The Museum of Contemporary History will satisfy the curious traveler with exhibits on Yugoslavia, the most positive and user-friendly attempt at socialism, and Slovenia's experience of socialist Yugoslavia was the most positive of all. I like to summit Nebotičnik, the first, I'm going to say quote-unquote, skyscraper in Yugoslavia, which is miniature by today's standards, but has a beautiful secessionist-style lobby and a fine cafe at its top, with gorgeous views over the city and to the Alps in the north. Enjoy a glass of wine at the top. Slovenian wines are among the highest rated in the world, and I particularly recommend the indigenous white wine called Rebula. I'm partial to it because I also wrote a whole book about it called Gold Wine. The Sunday Antiques Market along the wonderfully walkable Ljubljanica River is a time warp, as are dips into various bric-a-brac shops, like Antikvariat Trubarieva, where you can pick up true relics of Yugo-Nostalgia, a real term used frequently in these parts. Don't forget to grab a pizza at Parma, the first pizzeria in Yugoslavia. Its pizzas are nothing like you imagine a pizza to be, but they're very good, and they're served traditionally with blueberry juice. Sounds funny, but it's definitely worth trying out. And then we have Tsankariev Dom, the National Cultural Center, which is itself an architectural masterpiece that was featured not long ago in a MoMA exhibition in New York on concrete architecture in Yugoslavia. And right underneath it, you'll find Pizzeria Parma. Ljubljana is also a foodie paradise. But that's relatively recent. There was a time not long ago when I felt like I'd tried every restaurant of interest in Ljubljana, but no more. Top-level eateries sprout faster than I can sample them, but there are some tried-and-true classics. My favorite high-end establishment is JB, a restaurant perennially listed among the best in the world. Its eponymous chef Janez Bratož was the first chef to introduce Nouvelle cuisine to the region back in the early 90s, and he's considered the godfather of fine dining. He also has one of the most reasonably priced menus among Michelin star level restaurants I can imagine. A stroll through Tržnice, the central market, provides a smorgasbord of farm-fresh ingredients. Be sure to stand in the long line for the sauerkraut seller, a dynamic, smiling blonde woman named Marietka, whose family is among the last in the country to cultivate an indigenous cabbage that, it is said, makes the world's best sauerkraut. On fine weather Fridays, the market explodes into a huge outdoor food fair called Odprta Kuchnia, which is the best way to sample a wide variety of specialties. Foreigners inevitably gravitate towards cevapcici, the burger of the Balkans, best described as oblong meatballs, eaten with fluffy lepinje pita bread and kaimak melted cheese. This is not Slovenian but pan-Balkan, but it's the preferred fast food option here, utterly delicious and appealing to all non-vegetarian palates, and it's the most frequent food discovery for visitors. I like to take guests on a cevapcici crawl to taste the dish at a series of establishments in a row to determine your favorite. I'm partial to Aida, Dubočica, Sarajevo 84, and Sarai, but most locals recommend Chad, a white tablecloth experience in a park at the edge of the city center. For a more Slovene-specific snack, try Klobasarna behind the cathedral, which offers only Kranjska klobasa, a geographically protected local sausage that is worth a journey, served simply with a pot of mustard and a warm roll. For those exploring a bit beyond the center, a full lineup of traditional fare can be found at Privodniku in the Šiška neighborhood, in the former home of Valentin Vodnik, an 18th century author of the first Slovenian cookbook. I mentioned the central market, Tržnice, and it provides a great place to explore local cuisine and farm-to-table freshness. I mentioned a visit to Marietka with her famous Ljubljana cabbage, but you can also stock up on pumpkin seed oil, made from the only one of the 825 varieties of pumpkins around the world that's suitable for making pumpkin seed oil. It happens to be native to Slovenia, and the nutty, green, inky oil is an eye-opening topper for salads and vanilla ice cream even. Now you might take home a souvenir jewel-colored grave candle, which is sold from vending machines. I know this sounds weird. When I first saw it, I didn't realize it was a grave candle. I thought they were just beautifully colored candles. And I bought a bunch to decorate my first apartment, not realizing what they were. And thankfully not scaring off my future wife when she came over for a romantic evening. In terms of street food, I absolutely recommend Odprta Kuchnia. It was founded by an Israeli expat, Lior Kochavi, and it's the best way to sample a wide variety of specialties, all prepared in a street food version. So we've got dozens of restaurants from fancy to down home, all set up with stands in one square, offering food truck-style dishes. While most visitors will encounter cevapcici, I think there's a lot more to try, and this is a great way to do a sampler of various Slovenian dishes, but also lots of really good international ones. There are days when Odprta Kuchnia has as many as 20,000 people coming for a picnic lunch, so it's a really wonderful place to go and check out the city at its liveliest. Now, after your main meal, you'll be up for dessert, of course, and the best cakes I've ever had are found at Zvezda, a sweet shop with several locations, where locals go to see and be seen and consume Slovenian specialties like kremšnita, a milfoy cream cake famous to Lake Bled, gibanica, a layer cake with poppy seeds, walnut, curd cheese, and apples, and a flurry of house specialties. Try the chocolate dream cake, Čokoladne sanje. Ljubljana has joined the specialty coffee revolution, and we'll dedicate a whole episode to that. And the best cup in town is served by a Colombian expat architect named Alex at Črno Zrno, a pocket-sized cafe on Gornji Trg, beyond the lovely medieval bend of the main pedestrian thoroughfare called Stari Trg. Other great stylish cafes can be found in the Modern Art Museum and the City Museum, where the history of Ljubljana is on display. Ljubljana, legend has it, was founded where Jason of the Argonauts fame stopped en route home to slay a dragon, and the secessionist dragon bridge, upon which perch 4 bronze dragons, is the most photographed site in the city. The Roman town of Emona grew here, a stop on the trade route between Rome and Venice and Budapest. But the city was something of a rural backwater through the Middle Ages, when my adopted hometown, Kamnik, 25 minutes north, was of far more importance. Its importance grew in the 20th century, as did its shape. An 1895 earthquake leveled 15% of the Ljubljana city center. But fortune smiled, and there was a young architect, Jože Plečnik, who was commissioned to build most of the important structures and spaces in the city. It's rare that one place should have so firm the imprint of a single architect, and thankfully he was an absolute genius, a member of the Royal Society, and the darling of in-the-know architectural historians. I wrote my PhD dissertation on his work. We'll talk about him in more detail in a future episode. But when you wander around Ljubljana, you really get a sense that Plečnik is the genius loci. It is his city. Plečnik was unique, never part of an architectural movement, and his work is a personal hybrid of modernism, art history, and a dose of mysticism. The best place to get to know him is at his own home, Plečnikova hiša, which was just the subject of an award-winning restoration. Plečnik imagined rebuilding Ljubljana as a new Athens, and managed to receive commissions for so many buildings that taking a Plečnik walking tour, spotting his many buildings and parks, will provide a thorough tour of Ljubljana, which has the highest percentage of pedestrianized streets of any capital in the world. Ljubljana was the green capital of Europe in 2016, and it prides itself on its eco-friendliness, from an active zero-waste recycling program to a free-of-charge electric taxi service through the city center, to boasting the highest percentage of pedestrian-only streets of any capital in Europe. You can see for yourself strolling the cobbled medieval Stari Trg and Gornji Trg in the shadow of the castle and looping along the riverbank. If traveling green is a priority, then you can come here in good conscience. Slovenia as a whole won the National Geographic World Legacy Award in 2017 as the most sustainable country in the world. It is also one of the safest places. In 2011, it was ranked the 30th safest city in the world, higher than any city in the UK or the US. It's also ideal with children. With a pair of young daughters, I'm always on the lookout for family-friendly outings, and Ljubljana is rich in them. The official city play center is Mala Ulica, a maze of psychologist-approved games and spaces ideal for a rainy day. My girls love the Natural History Museum and National Gallery, which do well to integrate interactive exhibits for children. Slovenia has a surprisingly strong tradition of puppet theater, and the Ljubljana Puppet Theater puts on brilliantly executed puppet shows and features a magical puppetry museum. The Ljubljanica River runs through the city, and its banks are lined with inviting cafes. Crisscrossing the river by its many bridges is a great way to explore, from Plečnik's Cobbler's Bridge to his Triple Bridge to the Dragon Bridge. Plečnik's majestic National and University Library is worth entering to experience the ink-dark atrium through which students pass into a light-filled, soaring reading room. And while it's not regularly open to the public, if you're feeling plucky or can ask a concierge or a local to help you, you can very politely request to visit the 17th century Jesuit library in a seminary near the Central Market, a marvel of Baroque woodwork and frescoes that most locals have never even seen or heard about. Ljubljana is no stranger to elaborate beards and artful tattoos, and you can explore its alternative side by strolling down Trubarjeva ulica, where you might pick up a piece of Yugo-Nostalgia like the sleek fire-engine red ETA-85 rotary telephone made by Iskra and on display at MoMA, copper Turkish coffee pots, or any number of busts and portraits of Tito at Antiquariat Trubarjeva. Then go clubbing in the graffiti-laden but entirely safe and welcoming Metelkova district. Once the barracks of the Austro-Hungarian and later Yugoslav armies, it's now a compound of bars, nightclubs, and a former prison-turned-hostel, and the base of operations for 200 different youth organizations. Its decorative scheme has grown organically, with murals and statues added ad hoc, including a striking sculpture that resembles a group of golems stretched out as if their limbs were made of putty. And finally, we have half-day trips into the countryside. One of the benefits of Ljubljana is its quick and easy access to nature and escapes. The most obvious and frequented is the 30-minute drive to Lake Bled, one of the most photogenic places on the planet. And you could go a bit further on, just 15 kilometers further, to the wilder and more romantic Lake Bohinj. Or head on up to my adopted hometown of Kamnik, also 30 minutes north and a gateway to the Alps. The town boasts 3 castles and claims to have the most microbreweries per capita in the world, or at least it did prior to the pandemic when I was counting. Just beside it is a world-class botanical garden arboretum, with a playground area so elaborate and exciting that it will make your children forget about wishes to go to Disneyland. And a few minutes beyond is the otherworldly Velika Planina, a mountain plateau that visitors describe as something out of Lord of the Rings. Driving is easy, and Slovenia is so compact that it's worthwhile to rent a car if you'd like to explore a bit beyond Ljubljana. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Ljubljana Podcast. The Ljubljana Podcast is brought to you by Hotel Mrak, the best boutique art hotel in the center of Ljubljana. This podcast is produced by Urshka Charney and hosted by Noah Charney. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.